All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Suzanne Voigt, and I am one of the career coaches at the University Career Center at UNC Charlotte. And I am a co-coach for arts, media, and design. And this is one of my favorite topics to present on, do a meetup about, just because it's a lot of fun to create your creative portfolio. And regardless if you are more of an artist and you're trying to detail your more visual work, it could be that you are more computer centered and maybe doing game design or website development. It also could be you are a creative writer, someone wanting to go into journalism. So, regardless of the case, even if you just want to learn a little bit of tips about how to develop your own website, whether you're a creative or not, hopefully this session today will be very helpful to you. And you're always welcome to reach out to us and let us meet with you one-on-one, especially if you want that one-on-one help to actually go through your portfolio. So I'm not going to have the chat up while I'm presenting, but feel free to type your questions in the chat and we will get to that at the very end. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, so what is exactly is a creative portfolio? So it's initially a virtual place to organize all of your creative work or work in general. Okay, so a lot of people have virtual portfolios to be able to showcase, especially to employers, a lot of the work that they have, whether they're creating it in the classroom, on their own, or just have work that you've accumulated over the years, even from your high school days. And part of the reason we have a visual portfolio is to showcase specific skills that you might have that sometimes are a little bit more difficult to showcase on a resume. It's one thing to say, I'm a graphic designer and I've been designing in the Adobe Creative Suite, but just listing that on a resume does not really showcase your ability to use those softwares. So being able to showcase visually some of the different designs that you've created is just a really good representation of your skill set. It also represents your professional brand as a creative. So again, whether you're a writer, whether you're someone in tech, or whether someone more in the artistic realms, it's a way for you to showcase who you are as a creative. And also, think about it as being an extension of your resume and your cover letter. If you are applying to any type of creative role, you most likely will be asked for those three documents. You'll be asked for your resume, cover letter, and portfolio, whether it's a PDF or whether it's a digital link. So just know and be ready for that, especially as you start looking at internships and full-time jobs. So let's go ahead and get started with this topic. So a few things you want to think about when you're considering creating a digital portfolio. Now, all of you will not have literally every single one of these things within your website, but I do want to just highlight a few things you might want to consider adding to your website, okay? Especially if you're more of along the lines of the traditional artist, okay? You'll want to have a professional bio, and that professional bio needs to include a little bit of your background, including education, your work experience, any types of professional things that you've done. It could be you won a grant, or you have done professional conferences, or just anything that involves your work or your education. So for all of you, depending on your area of study, I would say please have that professional bio. And that bio also can be used on your LinkedIn profile in that summary section or the about section. So it's nice to be able to put it in multiple places. If you are a traditional artist, you want to have an artist statement, which really talks more about your perspective of art itself. What inspires you as an artist? Why are you drawn to creative practice? And so a lot of times faculty within those artist genres will help you develop your artist statement. And by the time you get to your senior show, you will have your statement because it actually goes along with your show. But again, I myself and my colleague, AJ Simmons, we both can help you to develop this artist statement if you need our help. You also want to think about including the best work, okay, of specific types of creative work that you've done. So we don't want to put everything in here, okay, all of your your drafts of writing, or some of the practice social media things you've done, or a practice website you developed. You really want to think about what is the best work I've done, what is the best work I want to showcase to employers. So you have to be very specific and kind of weed out some of those more practice type of work that you've done. And then a lot of times people will post an image, or they will post a writing sample, for instance, but they won't give a lot of detail around what it is. And so you really want to think about filling it out a little bit more by providing samples of each work. So statements around that particular work. So for instance, let's say you developed an Instagram post, and a lot of people will just post the picture of that post. But instead, it's really good to talk more about what was the goal of the post. Did it reach so many people? Let's say on Instagram. How did you develop the post? Was it in Illustrator or Canva? Or what kind of software were you using? So just a little bit of detail around what was the purpose, how did you create it, and if there was a reach, what was that reach? Okay, especially within the world of marketing. So just a little bit of context around each of your pieces. Contact information for yourself as well as all of your social media links. So if you have your Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, all of the social media, if you have professionalized your social media, you will want to link those here. You don't want to link personal social media to your professional digital portfolio. That makes sense. Keep your personal, and then create professional pages if necessary, and then link those to your digital portfolio. Testimonials are a really great way, especially for those of you who want to be income producers within your portfolio eventually. If you want to be entrepreneurial and start your own business, kind of stemming off your creative work, having testimonials from people who've worked with you is a really great way to drum up business and to create trust. So just start thinking about any of the clients that you've already worked with. Could they provide a short testimonial for you that then you could produce on your website? For those of you who are writers, I highly recommend you look at blogs, because a blog is a really great way to be able to showcase your work in that writing format. So even for those of you who are more visual artists, having a complementary blog to kind of go along with that visual work can really supplement a lot of that creativity and that meaning behind what you're doing. And you'll find this a lot with professional artists, professional musicians, and also with journalists, marketing, and a lot of people who do creative writing. They'll have sort of a combination of visual, but they'll also have that blog incorporated. And it doesn't mean you have to write on the blog every single day, but a blog, it needs to be pretty much kept up at least once a week. So kind of start thinking about how you might incorporate that. And then again, for those of you who might go more revenue for your website eventually, if not now, you do want to think about the platform that will be best for your online store. So how will people purchase whatever your creative product is from your store? So your pricing structure, information on how they can purchase, and if you allow for returns or if there's no return policy, as well as shipping costs. And I'll also add into this any type of tax, North Carolina state tax. So you'll need to provide all of that information more on that purchasing page. So those are a few of the different sections you want to consider. So there are two types of portfolios, okay, that I want you to think about. There's more of a generalized portfolio, and a lot of times this is used mainly in your academic work. So for instance, a faculty member, by the end of your senior year, you need to have some kind of digital portfolio to be able to graduate with your bachelor's degree or your master's degree. And usually with that, it can be a little bit more general. It can showcase a variety of skill sets. It can showcase, various work that you've done. There doesn't have to be a ton of consistency because it's more academic. It's more just this is a accumulation of all the things you've worked on. That's very different than a specialized portfolio that usually is when you're using that to apply for very specific positions. And so I will show you the difference between both. So this is a generalist portfolio. And this is just a very rough design here. But just to give you an idea, this Niner designer has examples of their work in graphics, lettering, UX, UI, illustration, packaging, environmental, animation, and I can't say that word, composing. And so when you think of all of those different genres within the creative sphere, if I were to look at someone's portfolio with all of these different tabs and all of these different designs, I don't really see a specialist in any particular thing. Okay. I don't see someone who just, is an expert at illustration, because they're also doing all of these other things. So not that they're not good, but there's just a lot to choose from. So it's a little bit confusing for me as an employer to be able to look at a portfolio like this. This is more, again, geared towards that academic type of portfolio. Compared to something like this. So Miranda, when you look at her portfolio, immediately we're looking at someone who is definitely a graphic oriented type of person. This looks very illustration, possibly painting, but definitely more along of that graphic type of artist. And so, this person is not looking at architecture. This person is not a writer per se. This person, it doesn't look like they're wanting to go into journalism just because of the theme of their particular portfolio. But you can kind of get a sense, either they're really into illustration or maybe painting, because those images, I'm not exactly sure at first glance if they are paintings or illustrations, or even if they're digital reproductions. So initially, that's what I'm looking at. This is a traditional artist looking at more like illustrative painting, maybe type work, versus this type of artist, where all of a sudden I'm looking at, models, 3D models of buildings, and I'm looking at sketches, and I'm looking at renderings of, final products. So, this is not a journalist. This is not someone going into social media. This is someone going into most likely architecture or interior design or construction management or something along those lines, because this is a different type of portfolio showing me a very specified type of work. And then finally, this is yet again another type of design. So this could again be photography. It could be more journalism. It could be media and marketing. So I'd have to do a little bit more digging to figure out who Alyssa is. But you can see initially there are some write-ups. So this potentially is more of a journalism major where they're including some images. Whether they actually photograph these images, we don't know yet, but we can definitely see that writing and those details are being incorporated. So you can see the difference in each of these very specialized portfolios, okay? So when you think about getting started, first of all, consider, is your portfolio for an academic, like a faculty, or is it more for an employer, okay? Because those will be, again, two different types of portfolios. So choose your best work to go into either. Look at other creative portfolios, especially from other people in your field, to get other ideas about what they've done and kind of pull from the ideas that you really like. Determine which digital platform will be best, and we're going to talk about a whole list of those coming up. And then make sure your website is friendly for both PC and phone, because most people in this day and age are looking at websites on their phone. So just make sure that it corresponds to mobile very, very well. All right. Before I dive into the website platforms, does anyone have a quick question in the chat? I'll take a quick break. Not, we will keep moving forward. Okay, I'm not seeing any messages, so we will keep moving forward. So let's talk about website platforms. Whoops. So I don't want to give anybody a website platform that requires coding. And so I'm going to be talking about non-coded type platforms that you can use, very easy build, drag and drop kind of platforms that anyone can use. Okay, and I've used several of these myself. So you don't have as much control with these platforms as those of you who might know how to design a website from scratch. And if you know how to do that, please go forth and design one from scratch. But this is more just for those of you who don't know how to literally program a website. Web hosting is normally free in these websites, but I do encourage those of you who want to take your portfolio and you want to take it towards a business, that you actually buy a domain eventually, okay? Maybe start with the free domain and then move towards the paid domain once you actually start earning income from the creative practice that you're doing. There are also some really good domain hosting websites like InMotion, Namecheap, SiteGround. There are lots of others as well, where you can get a pretty inexpensive hosting for your domain. So just a few to throw out there. Let's talk about Behance. So I'm going to break these up by what types of areas, considering what you're studying, what you're interested in, what each of these might be best for. So Behance is one of the best virtual platforms out there, and this is for anyone along those visual fields. So again, like could be gaming, it could be illustration, graphic design, it could be architecture, even though I probably would not do architecture for this. But anything where you're really wanting to showcase a lot of visual art, okay, Behance is a really great platform for this. It gives you kind of a magazine layout kind of template for this. So you can see the example on the right-hand side. It gives you this grid layout, which you can actually change up the grid and how you want it to look. But it's not like a traditional website where you have multiple pages and links and all of that. It's more streamlined and sort of a comprehensive grid. And the grid does, when you click on each of the images, it will then take you to its own page. And that's again where you can put some of that description around each of your visual pieces. But initially, it just looks like a grid when an employer opens it up. Another reason, though, I love Behance is first of all, it's free. But they also think about Behance as being almost like the creative LinkedIn. It does a wonderful job of being able to include other things within its platform. So you can search for jobs and internships that are creative. You can learn through their live sessions. And again, all of this is free. So it could be that you go in and you want to learn about, a gaming storyboard process, and you can go into Behance and you can learn from actual professionals doing it. They have sessions almost every single day, and you can watch them live or you can watch them recorded. So lots and lots of different things that you can do within this, including interact with other designers and creatives. So again, it's very much like LinkedIn, but it's much more geared towards creatives, which I think is a really great benefit. Linked to Behance is Dribble. So you actually have to be invited to join Dribble from someone in Behance. And the reason you might want to join Dribble is that it gives you that additional a creative platform to again showcase more of your work. I would say this is much more geared towards illustration, motion graphics, those of you who might want to go into graphic design, logo development, as well as UX UI type work. So not everybody is going to want to be in Dribble, but think about it as being kind of like a teaser. So a teaser image of the project that's fully housed in Behance. So kind of think it along that line. But it's kind of similar to Pinterest. If you've used Pinterest before, where you can go in and you can get inspiration from other creatives, and you can basically add your inspiration to what they call as collections. Like kind of like boards in Pinterest, you can collect things and get inspiration from other artists. And just like Behance, you can also watch live sessions within Dribble. So again, it just adds to that learning. Okay, so everybody most likely has heard of WordPress. It's been around a long time. WordPress is really great for those of you who are more tech savvy and you really do want to build a website from the ground up. WordPress is, I would say, what a lot of people use for that, but it also has free templates that those of you who do not know how to program can use immediately. And I would say it's decently easy. It's not my favorite one to personally use, but I would say it's pretty easy overall for those non-tech people like me to build a platform. You can also download a plugin called Thrive Architect, which makes WordPress a little bit more like a drag and drop platform. It already has some drag and drop features within it, but if you want even more, you can download that plugin. And it's pretty versatile. There are lots of different free themes that you can use, different layouts to correspond to the type of creative work you want to do, whether it's blogging, visual, more of that architecture and like construction. So it really does correspond to more of what you want to do. A few other ones that I highly recommend though, and again, these are all free. I've used Weebly and Wix myself. I find them both very easy to use. And then other ones that are similar, Portfolio Box, Argo, ArtStation, Blogger, especially for those writers out there, Squarespace, as well as Adobe Portfolio. So all of those are really great platforms. And initially, as you're getting started with your very first portfolio, I would say always try to find just a free website. Don't feel like you have to pay for anything initially. And then as you're building it, you can decide whether to take that into a professional domain at some point. All right, so developing your overall portfolio, things to think about. So when you are sending your portfolio to an employer, you have less than a minute to capture their attention, okay? And less than a minute to showcase your brand to someone. So you have to be very strategic in how quickly someone can actually maneuver through your digital portfolio. So you want to make sure that you're organizing your work so that someone can very easily be able to process through things. Don't have so many clicks but it takes 5 or 6 levels of clicking to get to like your top piece. It has to be very easy to get to. The number of work examples within your portfolio will really depend on your industry as well as your level of skill. So for those of you who are freshmen and you have 3 pieces that you've done that you would want to showcase, start with 3 pieces. That's great. By the time you're a senior, you probably will have 10 to 20 pieces, which is equally good. Someone who's been working in a field for 20 plus years, that portfolio will look very different than someone still in school. So just think about your portfolio as being something that will grow over time. But again, you're only wanting to showcase those really authentic and finely detailed works, not just everything you do. Make sure that you start building consistency in your work. So for instance, if you're coming up with collections of things, if you have a collection of writings that you're doing or a collection of illustrations that you're doing, make sure that you're putting those together so that the employer or the professional can see kind of the progression of a particular project. Try not to separate things and have them be disjointed within your portfolio itself. And then always make sure that you're showcasing expertise within the content you're providing to employers. This is a place to impress. Okay, this is a place to visually impress people looking at your portfolio. So make sure you're showcasing all of that work that makes a difference. So let's take a quick poll. Let's just pretend all of you are an employer. And I just want you to tell me based on the look of these two, so Marijan's or Allison's portfolio, which one would you just immediately hire? Let's say Marijan's number 1, Allison's number 2. Who would you hire, 1 or 2? Just type it into the chat. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of 1s initially. And you may be saying 1 because it's very colorful, it's very visual. I also really like the colors. We have 1 person that says number 2, a couple people. No, that's good. So again, yeah, the colors are very different. Allison does not have as many colors in that portfolio, whereas Marijan has a lot of really bright and bold colors. So on the initial glance, even though we kind of have a sense of what these 2 artists are doing here, initially you might just be drawn to Marijan's bright colors. Now let me change up the question though, okay? Because you're not typically just a general employer hiring any student, but what if you are an employer for a print publication looking for a new comic artist? Which candidate are you now wanting to interview based on who you are as an employer? Again, Marijan number 1, Allison number 2. Yep, so all of a sudden we have all these number 2s coming in. So Allison's may not be as bright and colorful and initially engaging. However, when we're looking at what they're actually hiring for, Marijan, it's very obvious that they're more illustration. Okay, illustration, painting, maybe a digital art. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's beautiful work. But when we're thinking about comic artist, Marijan is not giving us comic art. And so even though the portfolio is beautiful, me as an employer hiring for this are not going to consider it. That's an immediate delete for me. But even though Allison's is not as beautiful initially, I can see the progression of her pieces. You'll notice some of the different designs in her initial portfolio. You can tell sort of the concept of the character to the final product. And so again, even though hers is not as colorful, I'm probably inviting Allison for an interview. Okay, so just to give you that consistency and just think about yourself as that employer when you're developing your own portfolio. Super helpful to have their perspective. So again, set up your work for success in your portfolio. So make sure you're showing your creative process, not just your final pieces. Okay, show the concept. How did you come up with the idea? And then show the process. So for instance, let's say you are a sculpting major and you have a final piece that you created. Show the process of that piece and the concept. Show your sketches all the way through that final piece. Okay, always make sure you're using high resolution photos, whether you have a professional camera or whether you're just making sure that your iPhone, your other type of smartphone is taking really good high quality photos. And basically, you just don't want your photos to be blurry or too dark. Make sure that they can really pick up that light and all the details. And again, provide written detail of your work. Provide descriptions, details, the date of your work, and again, any ideas around the concept or the process that you use to create the work. Try not to use jargon or technical details, especially for those of you in UX UI or website development. I know there's a lot of technical jargon out there, but just remember that all employers may not come from that background. Okay, so just remember to use everyday language, even if you are describing something more technical. And then also try not to overwhelm the viewer with just a lot of fluff. Okay, choose your best work to show. And then from that image, you might then lead the viewer to maybe a different page, maybe then to show the process and the concept. So again, think about that initial view of your portfolio and how to then pull that employer into your portfolio versus them hitting exit because they're overwhelmed initially. Okay, so once you publish your website, some things to think about where to put your URL for your digital portfolio. Make sure it's always on your resume header and your cover letter header. Okay, those headers should be identical on both documents. Make sure you link it to your LinkedIn profile, and I encourage all of you to use LinkedIn. Think about LinkedIn as being kind of an extension, a different type of professional portfolio that can be linked to your very personal digital portfolio. Make sure that if you do have professional social media, that also is linked. And if you haven't checked out the about.me, for those of you who have lots of different websites, you've got LinkedIn and your portfolio, and you've got all the social media. Sometimes the about.me can be a really great hub for all of these different links. And then you can just send that about.me link to employers when applying for positions, and then they can navigate which of those platforms they want to see some of your work. Most of you, though, will probably have your digital portfolio, resume, cover letter, and maybe one or two social media. So if the about not me is not a good fit, it's just a really good option for those of you who already are pretty established in your field. Okay, and then always try to think about the companies that align with your skill level as well as your aesthetic. Okay, if you're someone who, let's say, is writing, let's say you're doing film critiques, you love to critique new movies that come out. Sending that to a finance business journal to be a writer for them is probably not going to be a good fit. Okay. Same thing, if you're a photographer and love to do sports photography, sending your sports photography to a fashion employer, probably not going to be the best fit. So, really know the type of employer you are tailoring your portfolio to. And in some cases, for those of you who are a little bit more open to the different types of industries you might want to work in, you most likely will have more than one portfolio. Okay. So really start thinking about the types of employers you want to be recruited by, and then start tailoring individual portfolios to showcase that type of work. And you do have to think about things like your brand and how it aligns with an employer's brand. Because if the employer cannot get an essence of their brand within what you're showcasing, it's very hard for them to make that bridge to why they should hire you. Okay. So really start thinking about the employer. Consider the work culture. Okay. Does that culture actually fit your personal style of creativity? And then know who you want to be like. Who are your inspiration that you're already following, maybe on social media, maybe you're already part of their blog, maybe you're getting updates from these professionals on a weekly, monthly basis. But go ahead and try to find some of those key people who inspire you and get ideas from them, again, about their portfolio, about their brand, about how they set up the look of what they're trying to give to their clients or to the industry that they're working for. And finally, just one last resource, but remember to use outside resources to continue learning about this. This happens to be one book that I was recommended to check out. It's called Show Your Work. It's a really good short book about just how to brand yourself as a creative. So I highly recommend it. We might have a copy of this in the library, but if not, it's pretty cheap on Amazon. It's like $10 or $11. It's paperback. It's really great, especially for visual artists, to be able to know how to showcase your work effectively. So I highly recommend that you check that out. But with that, I'm going to open it up to questions.